Welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast, where we explore the spirituality of the Christian child through the method of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I'm your host, Carrie Mecki Lozano. So today we have the first part of a two-part conversation that I had with Mindy Longwell and Claudia Margarita Schmitt about sacred history and the Incarnation. So as we have now entered into this beautiful season of Advent and Christmas, where we really live into this progressive incarnation, this beautiful piece of sacred history that we lift up quite often in the atrium with children, we hope that this conversation provides for you an opportunity to stop and reflect on this vast topic that's also really essential and beautiful. So I really encourage you to pull out your book, The History of the Kingdom of God, Part 1, From Creation to Parousia, which used to be History's Golden Thread, and read those first two chapters on the divine plan and sacred history, because they go really well with today's Part 1 of our conversation with Mindy and Claudia. I would like to read the first paragraph from Chapter 2, Sacred History, for you as a springboard into our conversation today. The peculiar nature of sacred history is implied by its very name, which seems to unite elements derived from two different worlds. When we say sacred, we mean something pertaining to God. When we say history, we are referring to the human world, to a series of events bound to time and space, two categories which do not pertain to the world of God. Indeed, the expression sacred history could appear to be a contradiction in terms. But it is precisely this apparent contradiction that constitutes the nature of sacred history. We will see that this entanglement of human and divine elements does not represent a contradiction any more than does the concept of the human being, a reality composed of both spirit and body. Just as the person is made up of both spirit and body, if we were to divide the two elements, we would have a cadaver. So sacred history is the indivisible combination of two factors, the work of God and the work of humanity. Therefore, we need two words to define it. It would be a serious error to consider these two elements as separate entities, or to put more emphasis on one than on the other. The work of God and the response of humankind meet and are bound together in the events that make up the history of salvation. This wondrous unity of the human and the divine must not be broken apart, lest we distort the true meaning and nature of sacred history. I hope you enjoy. Claudia and Mindy, welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be happy to be here again.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have you back on the podcast, Claudia. I love having you on the podcast. And you've brought a friend along with you.
Oh, the friend brought me along with her.
Well, okay, so Mindy, since you are brand new to the podcast, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, let's see. I've been in the work for, I'm not sure. Let's see. I started in 1993 before I was Catholic. I'm a convert, and Catechesis of the Good Shepherd really, and the Catholic faith, I kind of put all together in one. I think it taught me just as it does the children, my faith. And in 94, I became a Catholic and then began working in the church doing Catechesis of the Good Shepherd and have done so for the last 31 years. I just this year retired from being the director and I am now enjoying just doing 5 sessions a week and not all the other stuff that goes with being a director and formation. I'm a formation leader for all 3 levels. And with Claudia's help, I got her to get the door open to Rome, and we went for years to study there. together with a team with Pat Sauerman and Francis Walker and Patricia Hughes and myself, looking at all the materials and learning a whole lot. And then Claudia began, you came here when?
2003, I think.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
began then working for me. And we worked together for a long time and have been friends for a long time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that you said that you just do 5 sessions a week. Just 5.
Yeah, well, it
It's such a
is
small
from
number.
15. From 15 a week, it feels like it's a breeze. Like, oh, that's nothing.
Yeah, I could comparatively. Yeah, that sounds good. And then you think about Sofia, who just did the 1 a week every Wednesday
Yeah.
for 2 hours. She once a week, and then she did many other things outside of a Good Shepherd. Outside of that, and I think sometimes, especially in our world, we kind of compartmentalize her into this one box, right? And I love hearing that she just did it once a week because she served the kingdom in all these other capacities, even outside of catechesis, and just kind of had that fullness of self. I think that's just good for us to hear sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So 5 a week. Good job, Mindy.
Yeah.
You're working your way down.
Yeah, well, that's retirement,
Yeah. So you two would go and visit Sofia often and go look at her materials and observe her in the atrium. Is that right?
Yeah, I originally, I had, I'd taken every level 3 times, and I'm a material maker. I'm that person that has the scroll saws and the chop saws and loves teaching other people how to do that. But I found that at that time, back in the 90s and so forth, there wasn't a real consistency, from trainer to trainer. They would give you handouts and so forth. And we had maybe 1 or 2 materials manual. But they weren't always straight on, shall we just say. So I knew after making the material so many times that if I could be in Rome and just look at them and sit and write them out in Italian and measure them and do all that, I would begin to understand. We kind of had a little team put together, and Claudia took us all there, and we would go and spend about sometimes between 2 to 4 weeks in Rome, and every day just working in the atrium, and then getting to see on Mondays, of course, the sessions and observing.
Wow. So looking back, observing Sofia and Gianna in the atrium with the children in their small team of women, what is one thing that really sticks out to you, that really still speaks to you from those observation times?
Well, Claudia'd have to speak to Gianna, because by the time I was observing in the atrium, Gianna unfortunately had passed. But what sticks out to me? A couple of things I would think. One, the simplicity. And when I say simplicity of materials, I don't mean that they weren't decorated, because some of them were very decorated, in my opinion. They weren't just, a wood box. They had all sorts of things in there that I was not used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But the simplicity of using box tops to hold paper, and that, say in the level 3, that all the colored pencils were just thrown together in a box. They weren't separated in a beautiful Montessori way. Just kind of gave me the sense of, oh, it doesn't, it's okay. It's not exactly everything has to be of the top standard. That, and just, her home, the atriums were her home, and the beauty and the history of just those walls and the ceiling and all of the beautiful tapestries and so forth that were there, was wonderful. And really added a lot, I think, to the atriums. Her kids were just like our kids, which was really made me happy. They weren't the perfect child. There were times that, they were goofing off and the catechists were correcting them and they were doing what our kids do. And that was just a relief to see.
Yeah.
And Sofia was very generous with her time, even though, she wasn't there with us every single day. I don't think she came every day. Did she, Claudia?
Practically every day, Mindy.
Did she? Did she come every day? And she would,
Yes.
say, what do you want to see today? And she'd, stay as long as she could. But she was getting up in years, to say the least. And her wisdom was just incredible.
I would love you, Mindy, to tell about the experience we had with the virtues, that one definition was missing.
Oh, yeah, that was good. I'd never seen the virtues. Well, most of us hadn't. I don't think at that time it had made it across, the cardinal virtues hadn't made it across the ocean. And so, we had said, well, can you show that to us? And yes, so she starts doing it. And we get to the card that says humility. And, we turn it over to read it, and there's nothing there. And she looks and she goes, this work is never done. And then she turned to us and said, what shall we write?
Mm.
And I thought, if that is not the most beautiful example of humility.
Yeah.
She did not dictate it. Instead, together we came up with it as a group. It was just a beautiful, beautiful example of how humble she was, because she clearly could have just dictated what it should be.
Yeah. I love that. I love that well, just like what we do with the children. And what shall we write? What is it? That's such a beautiful, beautiful example of what it is that we do with the children. And it shows that she had embodied it to even how she was interacting with you as the adults.
Oh, completely.
She even applied it to that. That's beautiful. And I love hearing examples of Sofia, their children, like you're lifting up. It was not perfect. It was not perfect. She didn't have these children sitting with glowing halos around them in the atrium, right? Like she had real children and real materials that were breaking and, a box full of coloring pencils and materials missing things. And it wasn't perfect. And yet God took what she offered and made something really beautiful with it.
Yes.
And I think we all need to hear that a lot. I think we all need to hear that a lot.
And I think, too, you saw in her and in all the catechists that I observed, it wasn't as much the material as the passion with which it was presented.
Yeah, I love that. What about you, Claudia? I know that you've shared a little bit before on other episodes that you have joined us on the podcast. Just briefly, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Rome with Sofia and Gianna?
Well, yeah, in the 8 years, I practically could observe their simplicity and how they go in the deepness,
Yeah.
And like Mindy says, simple things. Just, remember the nativity was a shoebox. And just covered, even I was there and covered it with contact paper. But the eyes. I always talk about Gianna's eyes. I think you heard it always again and again. That was the part which spoke. Yeah, with Sofia too. She had sometimes a stricter look, but the eyes. And Gianna said to me, Maria Montessori, her eyes were always speaking.
Mm.
So that was very beautiful testimony from Gianna to Montessori, this eye language.
Eye language. I like that. Eye language. A friend of mine, Jacqueline Ruley, who's a CGS catechist, I've had her on the podcast before. She talks about with the children that you should have a twinkle in your eye when you're talking about things. It's like you're conveying how excited you are about the charisma, about the word of God, whatever it is that you're proclaiming to them, right? Even if it's spooning, you are conveying how excited you are about this to the child through this eye language that you just called it, this twinkle in your eye. It's amazing how powerful that is. I remember, I think it was you, Claudia, who shared, maybe it was Rebecca, I don't remember, you tell me, you that they came, I think it was Rebecca, that she, when she went to Italy, that she didn't understand Italian yet. It was Gianna's eyes that
I think it
conveyed her
was me.
meaning.
Yeah,
It was you.
I think so. Yeah.
It was Gianna's eyes that conveyed to you what she was trying to say to you. I think that's really beautiful.
And I think that that's what the children guide.
Yeah.
Because I think, and I said it again, that through the eyes you can see the soul of the child.
Mm.
Also her movement, how slow it was, with a rhythm, without getting tired. I mean, those women were elder women, and they sat on the little chair, children's chair. And I thought, how is that Gianna gets up from that little chair? But she did so, and because she wanted to be on the high side of the child. So that is what I remember from Gianna. And Sofia, also in a different way, was very simple, very structured, without words.
Such important lessons that I think we can apply to all of our, not just our ministry with children, but any ministry, our work outside in our homes, all of that, that essentiality, that slowness, that twinkle in your eye. I think all of that is such a beautiful thing to embody in just in your whole soul, just in your whole life. I love that. So we are now in the season of Advent, and we're preparing our hearts to celebrate Jesus's birth, celebrate the Incarnation, celebrate him coming again. And all of us in CGS, we have this full scope of sacred history that we talk about, most especially in level 2 and level 3. This age child from 6 to 12 is now able to move in time and space. And so they are ready to look back in history. They are ready to look forward in history. They are ready to see, where am I in this history, and what am I supposed to do? What is my blank page? All of that. And so we really, it's one of our great lessons, right? That you could say it with a Montessori term, of level 2 and level 3, this idea of sacred history. And so I think it would be really great for us as the adult to look at sacred history right now as we're preparing our hearts for Jesus's birth, but especially within the eyes of how we look at it in this work of catechesis of the Good Shepherd, especially how Sofia and Gianna talked about sacred history, because I think it gives a very unique, beautiful, hopeful way of looking at sacred history. And so I really would like to dive into that with you two today. So let's just look at the big picture. So sacred history. How do we even talk about sacred history? What is sacred history within the context of catechesis of the Good Shepherd? How do we lift that up?
Well, I think, depends on what level we're talking about, but it begins with the youngest, obviously. Just with the prophecies and with the infancy narratives and so forth is a beginning, but it's more of the Christocentric beginning, which all sacred history should be Christocentric. But I love, level 2, when that child can finally move through time and space.
Yeah.
And they realize they can. It's just so eye-opening for them. But those 3 great moments, creation, redemption, and parousia. I think what's unique to us is parousia. Not that it's a new idea, but that Sofia lifts it up. And in the work we do so much that it's quite often you hear creation and redemption, but it can sound a lot more like a history lesson. but I don't have anything to do with it.
Mm.
But it's not done. We're part of this. With parousia, I had asked Sofia once, what's the most important thing you want the child to understand? Now, we were in level 3 at the time. I hadn't specifically said 2 and 3, but I think we were more concentrating on level 3. But she said, I want the child to enter salvation history, to enter the sacred history and know they're part of it. And I think Catechesis of the Good Shepherd really gives that whole big picture. I know when I first received it as an adult from it, it answered so much. It made so much sense to us, to me. So I think the typology, especially the typology studies, but beginning with the Fetucia and those 3 great moments, we begin by just announcing them and what they are and the progression, what we're moving towards, and that we're part of it. Through the Fetucia and looking at time and how much time, and then with the gifts of what he has given us and what is yet to come, the greatest of all. And it sparks, I love, I'm sure you've done so, Carrie, but when you give that first announcement of parousia and you begin to explain it to the children and talk about it, and you see this look in their eyes that, I don't know, I can only describe it like they know there was more. It's like, I knew there was more. I knew it. Like something, like you've hit a truth within them that deep inside them they've always known. And when you finally say it, they're like, I knew that. I know there's more. I just find that so exciting. And then from then on out, you begin to hear that prayer at the prayer table. Oh, I pray that parousia comes soon. Let it come today. And that education to hope is something that I think is very unique to the work that we do. But it's not without its depth also. As we move into level 3 and we begin with the typological studies, looking deeper and deeper into how God did prepare us, that the sacred history chart does a beautiful job, I think, in that overall view from Sofia, that from all eternity, there's been a plan present in the mind of God. Like he's doing something, he's working on something. It's not just in the past, but to bring mankind to salvation, that thought, and then to see the creation, redemption, and parousia symbols we use, but between them, Old Testament, New Testament, or Old Covenant, New Covenant, and then through the typology, being able to look at how God was preparing us for the center and the most central moment being incarnation, being redemption and the birth of Jesus and his resurrection and the setting up of the church in the new covenant, which is the New Testament, but covenant, testament, same word, right? And so we have the old covenant in the law and the new covenant, an everlasting covenant in the Eucharist. I think the way we go about that and the unfolding of how he prepared man through the Jewish people, through the Hebrews, and all of his acts to reveal who he is, and then the ultimate act to reveal who he is through Christ, are looking at that not only, what do I want to say, is deep, but it makes sense, and it makes sense to the children.
Yeah.
To us. Like when I say to the children, well, you've heard Jesus is the answer, right? Because let's face it, from, when you get little ones that have never been in there, every answer to every question is Jesus, right?
Yeah.
God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if he is the answer, well, what was the question? And through all this, it allows us to go to, well, what was the question? Why did he need to come? And looking at the fall of man and sin and redemption puts it all into perspective, but that we're not done. Just like how in the Fetusha, when we announce the parousia, in the plan of God, when I get to the unwritten page, I kind of have the same experience with the older children. We look at all these things invented by different people and different civilizations that have been passed down to us that link us all together in humanity. But just asking the question, so what has God put within you that is not just for you, but for all of mankind? And how will you begin to discern that? Because He makes all of us for a purpose. And you can see in them this growing, I'm made with a real purpose. And the importance of that and the importance of entering into that.
Yeah.
It's the same type of thing. Like, I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah. That's huge. I think that's huge. And that goes back to what you said, that Sofia said is the most important thing for the children to realize that they are part of this history, right? So it's I have a purpose. And isn't that like one of the greatest cries of humanity, right? Like, what is my purpose? And I think that's why so many people feel very low sometimes, because they have lost that, or they don't know, they haven't explored what their purpose is, whatever. And so what a gift we're giving these kids, right? Because from a very young age, which they have revealed to us that this is one of their greatest cries at this age, from 6 to 12. What is my purpose?
Yeah.
Where am I in this history? And so I think that the way that we present sacred history to them is just so great, so beautiful, so needed, because like you said, we do the full scope. We talk about creation and all the time God spent creating. He created the minerals and the sky and the animals and other people, and then this greatest creation, which is his son, right? Now we've moved into this time of redemption. And Jesus's life, death, resurrection, and his light continues to spread even today. And we're still living in this time of redemption. And now you are part of this history.
Right.
You are part of this sacred history. So what are you going to do? What is your purpose? What has God put you on this earth? What special gifts has He given you to share on this blank page as we move towards parousia, as we move towards this time when God will be all in all? And I think because we give this huge, large picture scope of sacred history, and then we place them on that timeline, it gives them so much purpose. It gives them so much validity to their purpose, that they have value. You are supposed to be here. It would not be complete without your contribution.
Yeah. Well, and God doesn't make mistakes. He made you for a purpose. He made you on purpose, and finding that and knowing that is, I think, empowering to children and to all people to know that we have a purpose and a reason.
Yeah. There was an article translated by Patricia in our 40th journal that just from this past summer, and there's a line from it that I loved so much. I wrote it on my kids' mirror in their bathroom, and it said, God... Okay, I'm going to butcher it. It's not exactly right, but let's see.
Right,
something along the lines of, God did not make a mistake when He made you. He made you. He needs you to be you. God created you to be you, and that's who God needs you to be. You.
It is, and
such a beautiful. I think that we very indirectly, but also in a very directly, speak that message to these children. God needs you to be you in this salvation history.
Right.
And He, like you said, He had a plan, and we say this on all of our timelines. A plan existed from the beginning of time in the mind of God. Like, this was not some kind of haphazard thing that God says, yeah, sure, let's throw some, horses in there now. No, He had a plan from the beginning of time, and you were a part of it. Exactly as you are, with all of your strengths and weaknesses. He did not make a mistake with you. And He needs you to be you in this sacred history. That's huge. That's huge. We all need to hear that like 20 more million times.
And I've heard, now this is just, from parents. I'm now old enough that I have second generation coming
That's
to me.
That's awesome.
But I've heard from several parents that I might have had like their younger kids, but not the older children. And I've heard several of them independently tell me, there's a definite difference in my children between those that had catechesis and those who did not.
Mm,
And part of it is is knowing that they are there for a purpose. And I believe that they know that God created for a reason and loves them, and that motivates them out into the world
yeah,
to continue on and to remain faithful with Him.
yeah.
Um, it's been a beautiful thing to see, although it makes me feel exceedingly old, but
No, I can't wait to feel what you're feeling right now. So just embrace it. That's really beautiful.
yeah.
The other part of sacred history that Sofia lifts up often in her writings, and I'm sure like Claudia could speak to this, that she spoke about it often, was this at first, it was always initiated by God. And then creation responds, then man responds. God is always has the first word, but in which he's waiting a response of all people and each person. And I think that that's also very unique. I mean,
Mhm.
it is theology that's embedded even within our liturgies, right?
Oh,
But
clearly.
I think it's unique how well we lift that up.
Mhm.
That sacred history was first God speaks and then man responds. Throughout all sacred history, there is this back and forth
The breathing
happening.
of the body. Right.
Yes, this breathing in, breathing out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. It always does. It's a beautiful way to think of it. How
Yeah,
do I respond to this gift? And do I see this gift? God reveals himself through what he does.
right.
And if we begin to look with eyes towards God, we see every day his revelation in all things. And then how do we respond? Where is he calling me to respond? I think helping children to see that too is quite unique
Yeah.
in what we do.
And I think because our work is very child centric, the
Mhm.
children have revealed to us the value of sitting with the gift, which as adults, we tend to move very quickly to responding to the gift, whether it's thanks or, returning a gift, whatever, especially the youngest child. But I would say all the ages of children that we work with, they are so good at just receiving the gift
Mhm.
and just enjoying it.
Just being with it.
Yes. And
Mhm.
letting that just percolate in their hearts. And then later having a response to it, right? Or letting
Right.
that even just be their response.
That can be the response, clearly.
Yes,
And it's a
exactly.
beautiful response.
I think the children have revealed to us the value of that.
Mhm.
And it's neat to think about that in light of salvation history, of sacred history, of your response being an enjoyment of the gift.
Yeah.
So like just on a very basic creation level, so
Mhm.
God gave us this abundance of beautiful flowers or trees. He didn't need to give us so many trees. He could have just given us one tree and we would have gotten all the oxygen we needed. But he gave us this abundance of different types of trees, right? And so for us to just notice and enjoy and be with that gift and that letting that feel God's love so deeply by just being with it, like that's a response.
Yeah. Clearly it is.
And then when you move on to incarnation with Jesus, so now we're in this time of Advent moving into Christmas. How do we apply that to this time of year, right? Or all times of year, but most especially this time of year. So just receiving, just being with the gift, just allowing the gift to make us happy and enjoy it
Mhm.
and not needing to respond to it. So how can we do that this Advent and Christmas season with the gift that the greatest gift that God gave us, right, which is his own son? And how
Yes.
can we be like the child and just enjoy the gift?
Just be
Just
with him
be.
and be with the gift. Yeah. How do we do that? by studying the child, I think.
Yeah, that's true. By hanging out with children more often. That's right. That's why we
That's
do this
right.
work.
I want to be like them. I need to
Mindy,
be
is there
like
anything else about sacred history that you want to lift up before we move on to just incarnation?
Nah, well, I could probably talk for a really long time, but I don't want to bore you all. But no, I think just the wisdom of God and the amazing way how his plan of revealing himself through the people of the Hebrew people and to Christ is just, I just find it phenomenal how it's all there and the preparation's all there for us to be able to receive Christ and to know who he is and why he is and what
Mm-hmm.
he's come for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that took so long, but is so rich. I find like it's a never ending well
Yeah.
of delight
Yeah.
to look at that. And to be able to look at it with children is my joy.
Mm. What about you, Claudia? Anything that you would like to add about sacred history before we move on to incarnation?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell how I knew the word parousia.
Mm.
I was in the atrium from Sofia, and we was a celebrating mass. And one boy said, and we in the prayers of the faithful, and I pray that parousia comes soon. And what the heck is parousia? And I thought, I will not ask that, Sophia. I'm too embarrassed. So I asked the little boy, what is parousia? And he looked at me like, don't you know? It's when God is all in all. And okay, we pray to the Lord. Lord, hear our prayer.
You're like, what does that mean?
I know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. That's a good example because I think sometimes we throw around these words and definitions, like even with the children, like parousia, when God will be all in all. And you're like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have to pull out the lion and the lamb so you can actually figure out what that means, right? That's beautiful. So humble, Claudia. I love it. Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast. I would like to correct myself in the conversation with Mindy and Claudia. I referenced a quote that actually comes from Father Mangilo in his article, Learning to Love, that Patricia Coulter translated for us. And Patricia and I spoke about this beautiful article back earlier in this year on a podcast episode. And that article is from the 2009 journal. The quote states, "The image that God has of me is that I be myself. If God made me, it's me that God wants me to be." If you would like to read the article, Learning to Love, I have a link in our show notes so that you can access the whole thing. Also in our show notes, I have a link for Advent for Families page that has a whole bunch of resources for living into the Advent season as a family. Also some links to different things in our store to help you live into Advent as a family. I went ahead and put some links to past episodes that we had Claudia on the podcast, as well as past episodes that really help you live into the season of Advent and Christmas. So as you're preparing your heart for this season, those episodes might serve you well. This podcast is sponsored by the United States Association of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. If you would like to know more about the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, or if you would like to become a member, please go to CGSUSA.org. Thank you all for listening. I will see you in 2 weeks for part 2 of our conversation with Mindy and Claudia. Go and fall more deeply in love with God.